Hello guys and gals, and welcome back to another episode of Haunted Gaming. This time, we take a look at Earthbound again. We've done Earthbound quite a lot before, but we haven't done one in quite a while, an Earthbound creepypasta, but here we have one that's titled Shattered Bound. It may sound a little cliche, but again, you never judge a thing by its cover, right? Or its title. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this Earthbound creepypasta titled Shattered Bound. I'm one of those people who missed out on video games during the earlier era. My parents were very strict about my activities and thought that video games were the devil. I grew up doing other activities like drawing and cooking. I was good at what I had studied during my earlier years. Later, I was able to move out and do things on my own after, 23 years of living in my parents. Needless to say, I ended up buying some of the older game systems that I had missed out on. This happened to be the NES, SNES, and the Sega Genesis. After ordering a bunch of games recommended to me by several people, I went to play through them and sure enough enjoyed most of the games like Super Mario World and Chrono Trigger. After finishing Chrono Trigger, I became interested in RPGs. I went to ask several people if they knew anything, any more RPGs that I would like. Surely enough, I was told about Earthbound, which was a super rare game, usually priced at about $100 on eBay. I was unable to afford paying that much, so I decided to go on YouTube and search up a playthrough of Earthbound. I was amazed at what I saw, and it was no wonder why the game was so popular. A game that took place in a modern setting with an alien invasion? What more could you ask for? I spent the entire day watching the whole playthrough of Earthbound and became hooked to it despite having seen the entire playthrough of it. Sadly, I wasn't able to find a good deal on the game and gave up my hunt for a bit. About a month later, I got lucky. After having been subscribed to a Let's Player that I know very well, he posted a video on YouTube announcing that he was trading a couple of games. One of those games happened to be Earthbound, which was completely boxed. I grew excited and went to talk to him to see if I could, get the game off his hands. After making a deal to give up my more valuable games, which I had gotten over the past few months, I was able to finally strike a deal. I refused to give out the name of the person because I know he isn't to blame for what I'm about to talk about. After waiting a few days, the package containing my new game had arrived. The box looked to be in perfect condition, something rare for an old game like Earthbound. I opened the box carefully and took out the cartridge, leaving the huge strategy guide in the box. I inserted the game into the SNES, flipping the power switch on. I watched the staticky screen from the words, "The War Against Gygus." Afterwards, the intro began to play out, which is where I began to notice something strange. None of the sprites in the game's demo looked cheerful, like how they were supposed to. Every character in the game, including the four main characters, had been modified to look depressed. There was no music playing while this had happened. Did I get ripped off? Had I gotten a terrible hack instead? I watched through the whole demo before deciding to go through the menu, though. After selecting a new file in the main menu, Ness would walk in and still carry the saddened expression, which wasn't even like him. He'd carried this expression the whole game. Even if you had him riding the bicycle in Tucson, every other playable character and NPC in the game would have the same expression as well. Despite the sprites having been modded, the game would play normally at this point, making me think that this was a weak hack. I continued playing the game until I got to the part where I needed to save Picky. After leaving my house with Pokey and King, I had my first problem. All the enemies in the area would try to avoid me and run away the moment they saw me. This would usually happen whenever you beat a boss for that area, but even at level 1, the enemies still wanted nothing to do with Ness. Even if you were to corner them, they would only go right through the wall. All of them would have their sprites modified to look saddened as well. No matter where you went in the game, you would be unable to fight any of the roaming enemies because they would avoid you no matter how persistent you were, and because of this, it was impossible to even level up. I kept playing, saving Picky and heading back down the hill until I got to the Starman Jr. After being threatened by him, the Starman Jr. immediately disappeared and Buzz continued his dialogue as if Ness had just beaten him. This was another problem about the hack. It would skip the boss fights as well. After going in Pokey's house, the same theme that would usually play in the area wasn't there, instead it was just silence like the opening demo. After Pokey's father ended up catching the two going out, he sent them upstairs to scold them like in the original game. But again, there was a difference here. After Pokey's dad went up the stairs, an odd sound effect was supposed to play, but instead, there was what sounded like crying from a child in distress. After seeing Buzz getting smashed by Pokey's mom, I went to talk to him. What Buzz had to tell me was different than his usual speech in that part of the game. Buzz began to talk to me, and how I wasn't the chosen one and how the whole world couldn't be saved. And before fading away, Buzz still handed me the Sound Stone. During this whole scene, he acted like there was a much bigger threat than Gygus, who was of course the antagonist of the game. And at this point in the game, everything played like it was supposed to, despite the lack of being able to fight enemies and the depressing sprites. I made it to the giant step, which was supposed to be the first sanctuary location in the game. After going to record the location, I headed back down. During the middle of my trip back, the game started to lag, and the lag was awful. It caused the game's music to act up along with my character moving slower than before, and after trying to get Ness to leave the area, a blue swirl appeared letting me know that I had hit an enemy. I thought it was one of these black Antoid enemies due to how tiny they were on the map, but it turned out to be a much different enemy. It looked to be a blue, recolored smiling sphere from the Dusty Dunes desert area found later in the game, only it looked to be just a blue orb without the smiley face on it. Was it supposed to be a new enemy added into this hack? The battle message popped up saying, "Friends begin to form around you." The music plays during this fight, which was this really unsettling theme that you would hear when Pooh meditated into Dalam. Then another message immediately popped up asking me a question that I didn't know the answer to. WHERESJACOB. Where's Jacob? This text moved very slowly like how Gygas would talk to you during the fight against him, but who was Jacob? I remember playing Earthbound before and never saw anyone named Jacob in the game. There was only a lack of background in the battle, with it only being a black screen. I thought this was just an Easter egg into the game by the hacker as I decided to, attack Friend. I ended up doing only a few points of damage to the thing. It would then repeat its question to me, asking where Jacob was. I grew frustrated about 10 minutes of trying to kill the thing and getting nowhere in the fight. I decided to run away, but this wouldn't be the last time I'd encounter this thing. The more further I got into the game, the more frequent I would encounter Friend. After having gotten to Tucson and going to the Polestar preschool, the game lagged again, like it did back in Giant Step. Soon enough, the blue swirl appeared and I encountered Friend again. This time, I just ran away. Because it was an invisible enemy on the map, the only way you would know it's around is when the game would start to lag. The third time I encountered Friend was still at Tucson, but I forgot where. When I got into this encounter, I noticed the background was completely different. Instead of the background being plain black, this time, it was completely white. Just as I was about to run away, I saw something disturbing float across the screen. It was a silhouette of what looked to be a deformed child, but it was hard to tell. I began to feel uneasy as I watched the thing float across the screen. I wanted to get out of there, but was unable to do so on my first try. Afterwards, Friend began to ask me where Jacob was over and over again until the whole text box was filled with the question, which took forever. When I tried to run away, I was able to get away, which was a relief to me. At this point, I wanted to try to finish the hack as quickly as possible. The only way I could progress any further was to sell the items I had found in the gift boxes, so I could pay Applicate the $200 he needed. This is because I was still unable to fight anything. I played through rescuing Paula and getting rid of the zombies in 3. I was still getting attacked by the persistent Friend enemy. Well, there was nothing of interest except I found myself having trouble escaping from the fight the more I ran into him. I also ended up running into him twice while I was headed back to 3 from Saturn Valley. The game was going very fast due to the nature of skipping boss fights. I was about to enter my favorite city in the game, which was Fourside. I thought it was at least worth playing up to this point, but I was sadly mistaken. If you were able to get to this part in the hack, it would be impossible to progress any further. When I entered Fourside, I tried talking to an NPC, resulting in the same familiar dialogue. Where's Jacob? I began to feel spooked out trying to talk to anyone else, but they would only, just ask me the same question. I tried to go see the Runaway 5, but wasn't able to get a ticket because of being asked that same damn question with no option of, again, buying a ticket. I wanted to leave the city and go back to check on Threed. As I tried to head back, the game began to seriously lag, which again made me knew what was coming. When I got into the battle with Friend this time, I noticed the background to be all staticky. If you were to look carefully, you'd see all kinds of deformed looking silhouettes in the background. Some of the silhouettes looked to be of someone who was handicapped, while some of them didn't even look human at all. This time it just took a very long time to escape, but after about 8 tries, I was able to do so. When I got back to Threed, I was still being asked about Jacob, and knew what I had to do. I turned off the power to the game and turned it back on in hopes that it would fix the issue with the NPCs. When I got back to the main menu, I noticed that the data had been erased. I was really annoyed, but noticed another file that I hadn't seen before. I realized that I started a new game so quickly the first time that I didn't even see this file. It turned out that the file was of a level 43 save, with the file being named Jacob. Was this who Friend was referring to the entire time? It seemed like Jacob had played through about half of the game, but decided to stop it around level 43. I knew it was a bad idea to select the file, but I did it anyways. When I loaded the game, I was in Ness's house with the theme for it playing. Ness was also alone and didn't have any of his party members to help him. There was a huge difference this time around. The home was completely wrecked with most of the furniture and walls looking to be moldy. Everything looked to be completely ruined as if it had been a century since someone had come to this place. I wanted to go speak to my mother in the game to see if she was still alright. That turned out to be a big mistake. After getting to the staircase, I saw the skeleton of my mother laying on the floor. I began to get scared at how dark this was and left the house as quickly as possible. When I left my home, I noticed that on it didn't look any better. The outside of the house looked like it needed to be condemned right away, to be honest. The grass was brown and looked lifeless, while the trees looked bare and dried up. There was no music playing in the background, which fit very well for what I was seeing. I didn't even know if I wanted to see how the rest of Onit looked, and decided to go towards the town anyways. On my way to Onit, I saw another horrifying sight laying on the ground. There were bones of what used to be various spiteful crows. I left the scene and heard the music to Onit slowly picking up. This wasn't cheerful, though. The instruments sounded very old as the musicians were struggling to even play the theme properly. It sounded very depressing and nearly made me cry. There was also no one in town, but just the skeletons of the people who used to live here. That's what I was afraid of. I was unable to get into some of the buildings because some of the skeletons were blocking the doors. There were a couple of places I could get into, but none of them had anything of interest and looked no better than how my place looked. While I wandered around the ruins of what used to be on it, a message box popped up. Do I still have a purpose? After this, the game began to lag, and it was the worst lag I'd ever experienced. And after the lag began to stop, I got into another encounter and knew who it was at this point. Friend. This time the background was complete static and none of the silhouettes from before could be seen. The music was also changed to when Gygus was close to being defeated. Friend was gray now, as opposed to being blue. Because I was level 42 in this save, I tried to attack Friend and was able to deal a bit more damage to it this time. Because of this, I wanted nothing more than to put that thing out of its misery. Friend didn't even try to ask me where Jacob was, but instead did nothing and would only cry through the whole battle. After a couple of rounds, I got another message. Do I no longer have any purpose? I continued to try and damage Friend until it gave me one last message. Farewell, Jacob. Friend then began to disappear like any other enemy would in the game. Afterwards, I was returned to Onit without even a message telling me that I had won. I found myself unable to even move my character and just stood there. And about 20 seconds later, the game completely froze and the screen went black, staying that way. I took the game out and tried to blow on the cartridge, but it wouldn't play. And after trying to get the cartridge to work for about 3 more times, I gave up, and to be honest, I'm glad it was over. I had one more thing to take care of. I went to contact the person who had done the trade with me for this messed up hack. I was furious and demanded answers, telling what I had just experienced, but left out some of the things in fear that he would think I was some complete lunatic. He told me that he was sorry that he hadn't checked the game because he didn't want to open the box. It came in and risked damaging the package. He told me that he would give me back my game since he had gotten the box for free from someone who didn't even want the game anymore. Did this person happen to be Jacob? I guess I'll never know. Since I felt bad, I offered to take back half the games I had traded him, since I knew it wasn't his fault entirely. He told me I could just keep the game since it was worthless, and so I did. I went to put it back in the box it came in, but saw something that gave me shivers. The box that looked perfect before was now completely torn and looked to be moldy, as if it had been kept in a bad area for so long. The player's guide wasn't any better. Most of the pages had been torn out. Any of the pages that were remaining were now unreadable. I threw everything out I'd gotten that day. Well, that was something. Honestly, out of the many Earthbound creepypastas we've done, and we haven't done one in a long time, here we have one that's kind of good and kind of bad a little. For starters, it bathes in realism, since its phenomenon is something that's totally a characteristic of a hacked ROM. Palette swaps, dialogue changes, and enemy AI rerouting, and then injection of enemies. It's all been done in games before, and with something like Earthbound, I'm sure someone talented enough can make their OC ROM hack and ship it out on some reproduction carts. But it makes you think. In a way, these games are more valuable sometimes than the real thing. I'd much rather own a creepypasta game, if you will, than an actual one sometimes. Think about it, would you rather own Sonic the Hedgehog or Sonic.exe? Bad example, but you get what I'm saying, alright? The story begins with a punch, and it builds you up with the phenomenon as you're seeing the travels from Onit, to Tucson, and beyond. And you get this hook and chorus, which brings you closer, and the mentioning of Jacob was peppered in properly. And didn't just throw, you out. It didn't just, throw it on you and whatnot. It wasn't as good as, say, the Ben arc, but it was still very well done. The end was a tad anticlimactic for me, but I was glad it didn't go so far as to kill the rest of the story with, God knows what kind of ending it could have thought up as. But I still feel that regardless, it should have been rewritten. It's too anticlimactic for me, but to me it just needs more oomph. And again, that's just my opinion. So, it might not even need that. I just feel it does. But as a whole, it was a decent creepypasta. Technically, it made sense. Again, this is a very popular game, like Pokemon and Sonic. These 3 games have big ROM hacking communities, people, and they even have mod tools for their ROM hacks. So, it only gets easier and more creative as time goes on with these games. But again, on a technical level it works, and on a story-wise level it was interesting to go through, and it was, better than many other gaming creepypastas out there. Does it still have anticlimactic ending? Yeah, it does. But for the most, I did enjoy it. And in the end, I would always like to ask you in the comments below, what would you rate it and what would you change to make it better? This has been another episode of Haunted Gaming. If you like what you saw, then please like, comment, and subscribe, and please share what creepypasta you'd like read in the comments below, since again, it's all community-driven, right? This is me, Mudahar, and I'm out.